think I always believed in God, and I was looking for hope whilst growing up in a very dysfunctional family, so I started to read my Bible. When a local vicar befriended our family, I thought it was an answer to my prayers, and his church seemed like a safe place for me and my family. However, his friend who volunteered at the church was abusing me, which was terrifying, and he abused other girls within the church. The vicar also abused 2 male members of my family. I was devastated. I left the church and the town as soon as I could and was able to build a good life with a lovely family. But in my 40s, my health failed. Medical experts have attributed my conditions, which have stopped me from working, directly to the abuse, to the trauma of the abuse. The paperwork, the procedures, the people and the pressure must be inconvenient at the very least in safeguarding. But even by doing this, those working in this area are saying to the perpetrators, not here, not in this church or this school or this children's work, not on my watch.
I think safe recruitment is so important because as a Christian community, we long to be a place where people are able to flourish as the people that God has created them to be. And so what we want to be able to assure people is that actually this is a safe place to be, in which they can relax in the presence of God and in the presence of others.
The church is for everyone. The good news of Jesus is for everybody. We have a duty of care to protect the most vulnerable in society and to try and deter unsuitable applicants from applying for working with children, young people and vulnerable adults.
I think it's important to feel safe when you get to church. It's supposed to be a safe space. That's something that we preach a lot at church. A church is no different to other institutions in the country, and they all abide by, sort of safeguarding protocols and procedures, and I feel like as a church we should also stick to that.
It's important that you feel safe at church because it's somewhere where you should be able to come and forget about all your worries, and it's somewhere where you should be able to trust everyone. I feel like I already know that they'll be safe because I know that our church will always do the checks and they'll make sure that the person is trustworthy. But when I hear about other things going wrong, I feel like it brings this whole stigma on all of the churches that we're not a good place, and I think we need to try and stop that happening because it is a good place where people can feel safe.
As a church, we are called to reflect the image of God in the world through being a compassionate presence. The fact that the church welcomes all means that managing safeguarding is often a challenge. DBS checks are important, but are only part of the safer recruitment process. The reality is that many individuals who have or will abuse do not have a criminal record and no intelligence is held about them.
We're talking here about safe recruitment and also safer people management, which means that not only do we want to recruit the best people for the particular roles that we have, but it's equally important that we look after them in that role and encourage them to thrive and to flourish in their roles.
We had someone from outside the village who said, I want to be a volunteer. So we said, can we have a reference, please? Can somebody give you a reference? I don't need a reference, I've got a good job. No, we need a reference. And they wouldn't give us a reference. We never heard from them again. So that was a way of being able to identify someone that might not be appropriate.
Safeguarding is so important, particularly in our context. Many of the roles are held by volunteers. So it's important to be role specific as to who can and who can't work with children, young people and vulnerable adults. And it's been really helpful with this new guidance, the fact that it helps us to determine who actually needs to be safely recruited, who does this apply to.
If somebody doesn't feel valued, they're not going to be happy and they're not going to carry on. And we need volunteers because they're the backbone of the church. So safer recruitment, it's not just about the recruitment, it's about the people management to make sure they keep the role and appreciate that they're appreciated and that the church cares.
The revised House of Bishops guidance policy has been a while in coming, but it's been worth waiting for because it's the product of people who've thought carefully in order to produce a valuable tool that can be used effectively in parishes. And thereby we keep everybody safe, we get the best people for these roles, and we can contribute towards embedding good safeguarding practice across all our parishes and across all our dioceses.
When I first received it in my inbox, my heart sank. So I thought, oh no, more to read, more paperwork. But the more I started to read it, the more I realised that actually this is an iteration. It's not reinventing the whole wheel. That actually much of it that's already in there, we're already doing, because this has become practice over the last few years anyway. And what I then started to read for was the places where we needed to tighten up, and the places maybe where there were some small changes. So I started off feeling quite depressed, but actually ended up feeling really quite hopeful.
This new ebook is so easy to use and so easy to find what you need that it makes people feel secure in what they're doing. It separates out what you have to do, what's essential, with what's good practice. So that's what it's easy to use. In the past, it was all mixed up. There's this clarity now.
I found that the e-manual quite helpful in terms of how it has the relevant paperwork and the forms embedded within the guidance itself. So you can just say, right, that's what it says. Click, I need to print this off, save this, adapt it for my parish. So actually in the end, once I got used to not having a book in my hand and a piece of paper, actually I found it very helpful.
So if someone came to me and wanted to know, well, is this really necessary? There's so much work to do. How am I going to get it all done? I would say to them, well, first of all, have a look at your assessment tool, have a look at the manual. There's a new training module that's been released. There's so many resources. The dioceses are here to help you. The church is changing and we're responding to the changes in society. And it's so important that we look beyond recruitment and look at people management as a whole.
I would ask them to tell me which parts of it represent such a challenge, and I would talk with them and encourage them to see things in a more positive way. And I would also use examples of cases that I've been involved with when I was a safeguarding advisor where people weren't safely recruited, and I would ask them to think about how they would feel if they were responsible for somebody who actually became a danger to the very precious people in their parishes.
I think if somebody's feeling like it's all too much work, I'd probably say two things. The first of which is that there's help out there. I think the second thing is that actually this is about helping people to flourish. That actually this is about creating a space in which people feel safe to meet with God and to bring before God some of the most profound things in their lives. This is at the very heart of what we're doing. Sometimes it can feel like lots of work, but actually it's always worth doing.
I would say to anybody working in safeguarding, I can see it's difficult, the pressures and sometimes the people, but the very fact that you're even doing it might deter perpetrators. And I want to thank you because you are waving a flag to victims and survivors that says, I care.